Good afternoon and welcome to Discernment Radio. I'm your host, Danielle Pailly.
And I'm your host, Cindy Riednauer. We are Discernment Radio, people and topics to enhance your life.
Today we're joined by Jean Walters. Jean is a personal growth consultant and business consultant in St. Louis, Missouri. Her mission is to help people overcome obstacles, confront life's challenges, and break through boundaries by designing solutions, re-education, and resolution. She is the best-selling author of several books, seminar leader, and has a syndicated radio show called Positive Moments. Welcome to the show, Jean.
Oh, hi, and thank you so much for that lovely introduction.
We're excited to have you. So could you start by telling us a little bit about how you got into this work and what you do?
Well, I would say I sort of got into it by accident because my curiosity was such that I had to figure out everything. I really didn't like the idea that life was happenstance and that people seemed to feel like things landed on them without any reason or logic to it. So I began a search to try to understand what this was all about, how this all works, this universe. And once I can understand it, then I could feel a little bit more secure and stable with it. So that got me into metaphysics. And metaphysics was the study that helped me make my connection to spirit. And so that led to meditation, that led to teaching, that led to doing Akashic readings, and so on and on. And then interestingly enough, people started coming to me. And then finally I thought, a friend of mine said, well, why don't you just do that? Why don't you just do the coaching? So I got more training with it. And then that's sort of how it all evolved. It evolved. And I think when we think about that evolution, it's a perfect representation of how spirit works when we yield to it, because I never had a sense of this is going to be my work.
Yeah.
I was just curious about my own evolution and how I could figure things out and have some sense of control in my life. And then everything just sort of escalated from there. So that's how it all started.
Now, I'm curious with the metaphysical backgrounds, because so many people come from a more strict upbringing, and when they find it, they run into some conflict. Was that like that for you, or did you grow up with just all that openness?
Well, I didn't have a lot of the dogma that people have. I did go to church, and I was raised that way, but I didn't have a lot of dogma in my life. But the dogma I did have was from my mother, meaning she had a lot of rules, and she did actually try to control her family. And so what I had to do is unwind a lot of her ideas that didn't make any sense to me. But I looked for answers, and I've always looked for answers. And so I think because my mind is so curious and I am so interested in finding the truth, when something doesn't feel right, I know it. And so I begin my search. And so there was a lot of things that I had to undo. I mean, she had a major anxiety problem, and she had a major problem with just fear, pretty much of everything.
Did we have the same mother?
Yeah. I think a lot of people have the same mother. But the difference for me is I guess I'm a kind of a rebel, because if it doesn't make sense, then I'm just going to find a different answer, and I'm willing to do the work. So a lot of people will just say, oh, that's how I was raised. And so they're stuck there. And that doesn't make any sense to me either. So.
Absolutely.
I love it. So I love that you said that.
The whole idea of all the rules, and it should be this way and it should be that way. A lot of it I just tossed out, and I just started searching for something that made more sense. And that's my advantage, I think.
So you alluded to the Akashic Records and also about training that you did. Could you explain those two?
Yes. Well, the Akashic Records, there's a field of energy in which we all live and breathe and have our being, in the quantum field. And within that quantum field is what I would call an energetic field, which is in essence a record of everything we've ever done, thought, or been. And much of the time, some of our actions are based on, again, belief systems and so forth that are imprinted within that field. We can go to that field of energy, and in my readings, I connect to the person and the field, and I use their full name and birth date to get their signature, as it were. And then I can read what those issues are and might be where they started. It's not always necessary to know where they started, but sometimes it helps. Mm-hmm. And then what needs to happen, where they're stuck, what they can do differently, just basically energy and information. So it's like thinking of each person as having an encyclopedia about them, and then how to get in touch with that so that they can begin to unravel some of those things that need to be improved and evolved. So I don't know. Does that help? Does that explain it well enough?
Yeah, no, that is great. And I was curious, you had mentioned doing the work. And so often when I've taught meditation, or when I know people who want to make a dramatic life change, and they're coming from 30, 40 years of thinking one way, and then they want to overnight change, and they get frustrated that it doesn't happen overnight. So doing this work, what does that involve? And I'm assuming that it takes a long time for some people.
For some people, but I think a reason it takes a long time for some people is because they're so concreted into their dogma, and their dogma can be, you should be perfect. There's a lot of people got this idea about perfection, and I always am curious about it. Like, what is that? How does that work? Tell me what it looks like, because I have no idea what perfection is. It doesn't make any sense to me, because if there was such a thing as perfection, wouldn't things stop evolving and just be perfect? And they could never answer the question, honestly, but I always ask it anyway, just because it throws them into a muddle. But the whole idea of working hard, people have an idea you have to work so hard, and in truth, you really don't. But you do have to be willing to challenge yourself. The whole idea of perfection is ridiculous. And if people would challenge themselves, go, how am I going to be perfect? What is the value of it anyway? And and I always ask this question, who do you know that's perfect? And of course, they never can come up with that either. Yes. And so a lot of my work is just challenging people and getting them to start thinking, because a lot of it is just this kind of robotic thought process that they were taught, so they accepted it, and at some point you have to go, wait, what is that? If trees grow millions of leaves every year, millions of leaves with basically no effort, why can't we be abundant? Why can't we be as abundant as a tree? To me, that makes sense. So those are the ways that I kind of help people, but it's the way I challenge myself too. If I find myself in a belief that doesn't feel right, that seems limiting, I challenge it. Like, why would that be the truth? Come up with some evidence. There was a little game we played years ago when I was in training through metaphysics, and we would put people on trial, and we say, okay, you believe that you're a loser, or you're worthless, or whatever it is, so prove it. And then we'd have a jury. Ooh. Well, I had to repeat kindergarten or something, And we go, okay, is that enough proof that he's a loser? That's like, no, that doesn't cut it. That's not enough. So he'd have to keep coming. And pretty soon it got so silly and ridiculous that, they'd have to drop the idea. But I kind of like that a lot, and that's what I do. I sort of challenge people, like, okay, tell me how exactly you're a loser or you're worthless, because I'm not getting it.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's an awesome idea. Now you had mentioned your mom being anxious, and I wonder if you grew up with anxiety, and a lot of people are stressed and are anxious. How do they unpack that and grow out of that so that they're not having that knee-jerk reaction all the time?
Yeah, and my mom never did, by the way. And I worked her so hard. I challenge her so much. But her anxiety really based on fear, and it was fear of everything, fear of different races, basically fear of the unknown, fear that she didn't have control, which of course she didn't. And so I looked at that. I really looked at it and analyzed it a lot. And I looked at my own self and where have I adopted those ideas? And I just started challenging them like, if you're afraid of another race, go meet that person.
Mm-hmm.
Go find them and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're afraid of gays, go meet some gay people,
Mm-hmm.
And pretty soon, as you just keep pushing yourself into these arenas, you find out there's nothing to be afraid of. And that was my philosophy. I was so afraid of speaking before people, so I did it. I did it and I did it until there was no more fear. And now I'm kind of brutal that way with myself. I just won't allow fear to be there because I saw what it did to my mom. I mean, she was a wreck, and I just won't allow it. And so I just push. And if I find out I'm afraid of something, I just go do it.
That's
you're
great.
afraid to fly to a foreign country by yourself? Good, you're going to do that next time. Each time it worked. Each time I found out that there was nothing to be afraid of, that it was all something I built up in my mind. And when I actually did it, it was like there were people there helping. They were, it all worked. And so I just push. And I know a lot of people won't do it. They just let fear run them. But there's only two things in life. There's fear and there's love. And if you want love, you can't be indulging yourself in fear. And it is an indulgence, by the way.
Interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Because you're spending your time keeping yourself restricted and tight and unable to explore anything, unable to be what you're capable of being. And that's a huge cost to pay to stay in fear. So you're indulging in fear. And by taking the opposite road and going, I'm going to make this an adventure. I'm going to see what's out there. I'm going to plunge into, doing that speech before people. You begin to find out what you're truly capable of. And that's what I think we're here to do, is to expand.
Mm-hmm. So you said that you have to challenge yourself when you feel negatively about anything. Do you, after all these years, still have challenges like that?
I'd have to say yes, but right this minute I can't think of one. I was thinking like I'd love to go to Jerusalem, and so I'm kind of looking around for maybe a trip to Jerusalem. And I can't say that I'm afraid of that, but there's still this always there's a sense of unknown that goes with things, and you just kind of plunge through it. But it's not in any way disabling me. It just never been to Jerusalem. I wonder what it's like. Just go do it. And there'll be people there, because I'll go on a tour or something, and there'll be people there that will be so delightful and wonderful, And that's what I found, is that if you just stay open, it's like spirit gives you the way. And that's what I think is my greatest asset, is that I am so connected to spirit, meaning the universe. And then I allow it to guide me. And that's intuition, by the way. And everybody has that. But most people override it. And I go, you can't override it. You're shooting yourself in the foot. You can't do that. So anyway, that's a huge asset that I have, and I teach people how to listen to that.
Okay.
I'll give you a little story. I have a guy who makes these incredible lists. I mean, he goes through hours and hours making these lists of a pro and a con,
You could have saved him a lot of time.
Oh my God, he makes it so much work. Here's all the pros, here's all the cons. And then he'll come in and talk to me, and I'll go, so which one feels better? And he'll go, that. I'll go, there's your answer.
That was easy. So you have a lot of YouTube videos, and they feature the universal laws. Can you explain those and why people should understand those laws?
Yes. Well, the universal laws are so important. That's really what got me started. I had to figure out what this process was in the universe. I think it's Wernher von Braun, the man who ran the space program years ago. He said there is a process in the universe, and if we understand it, we need to understand it. It's important that we understand it, And so he started that many, many years ago. But that's what I wanted to know is what is the process in the universe so that you can begin to predict things and everything is not such a shock and a surprise. And that's the universal law. So just to start with, we can understand this cause and effect is a universal law. And it's very logical, if we drop a pen to the floor, if we drop a pen from our hand, it's going to fall, hit the floor. And so that's cause, dropping it, and hitting the floor is effect. But if everything in life is the same way, so if I walk into a room and I'm angry and I'm just projecting all this angry emotion, it can't be a shock that people move away from me. Mm-hmm. And by the same token, if I walk into a room and I'm smiling and I'm feeling love and kindness, it's not a shock if people are drawn to me. So I think when we start looking at life and realizing that law of cause and effect is in motion at all times, the Bible calls it, as you sow, so shall you reap. So by knowing that, we can begin to anticipate what's going to come next. If we want something so badly that we're willing to put the work in to get there, like as I was saying, I wanted to get past fear. I wanted to get into whatever the opposite of that was, which I didn't know when I was really young, but it's love. And so I explored crossing over from fear to what comes next. And I got to a place where I'm very confident. I'm very knowing. I understand a lot of things that people don't because I've explored it. So cause and effect. So that works for every single person. And what's interesting is I had a client once and she wanted to be in a relationship, but she hated men. And I said,
how's that working for you?
Yeah. I said, the thing is, you can be in a relationship, but the man that you're going to attract is going to hate himself. Yeah. In order to be in a relationship with you, he's going to have to hate himself. And
wow.
So is that okay? And she said, yeah. So the next time I saw her, she actually had 2 relationships going on, and they were both men with incredibly poor self-esteem. Right?
But you brought up a really good point when you mentioned walking into a room. So if you're going into a meeting, say in a company, and you're giving off that you're anxious and doubt yourself, like you're not good enough, if you don't think you're good enough, how are they going to feel that you're good enough? Because you're projecting that. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Exactly. And so if you're going to go in a meeting and you're unsure of yourself, what would be better is if you made a list of all of the things you have to offer. Maybe you have a certain insight. Maybe you have a certain knowledge about a certain process. What is it that you're bringing into that meeting? Maybe it's just goodwill, but if you have a sense of what I'm going to bring into the meeting, then you can counter some of that until you get strong enough to where you are a great asset to whatever meeting you're in.
Yeah, but you have to believe it first. So that kind of
go through that process of what am I bringing?
Yeah.
Everybody whether it's friendship, whether it's positive energy, whether it's kindness, whether it's a great listener, whether it's dependability, they're always bringing something into whatever situation they're in, but they're focusing more on what they are lacking rather than what they're bringing. I tell people that are looking for work the same thing. I said, it's fine to make a list of what you want in your job, but then you make a second list of what you're bringing to them. Because if you don't make that second list, you're making it harder on yourself to attract the right position.
Oh, excellent idea.
Powerful. That second list is powerful.
Yeah.
Because when people are looking for an employee, they don't want just what am I going to get from you, from the person. they want to know, what are you going to give to me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of results do companies and individuals experience when they work with you?
You know what? It depends a lot on their state of mind to start with, because sometimes in companies, it's like, oh, here's another seminar that we have to go to, you know? And so there's a certain resistance to start with. So basically the people that are very open and willing and interested just transform. And the ones that are just, you know, not open, just it's cause and effect, you know? Mm-hmm. They get whatever they're willing to allow themselves to get. With people, with individuals, they come and they're ready. They want something, you know, they're open to receiving something. And so they might be resistant in like, oh my gosh, I have to give up an old belief. But in time, they're more than ready to do it. I mean, I see a huge transformation in all my clients, to tell you the truth. And if that's not what they're really wanting, they go away. You know, mostly the people that come to me are very attracted to what I offer. So I can't say, you know, I mean, I have great clients. They're fantastic. I think companies are harder to work with because, again, there's that variety of willingness to change. But I have had whole groups from different companies come to my class that I do called Listening Beyond the Words, developing communication skills. And their eyes are like popping open. And they're like, wow, because the things that I'm teaching never occurred to them. And they have to look at communication from a whole different level.
Yeah, and I happened to, in watching one of your videos, you were talking about higher and lower vibrations. And when you mentioned the people who are not drawn to the work will eventually go away, I've had experiences, and maybe this is along the lines of what you're talking about, where you're connecting with somebody and for some reason it's just you're not connecting well. And they invariably, either you move on to something else or they move on, but you don't end up in that relationship for any length of time. And then I've had where those people years later come back. And I wonder, if your vibrations change, do people come and go out of your life as a result of that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I think of it as planting seeds. You know, like you might say something. I mean, people call me and they'll say, are you the Jean Walters from 40 years ago that did this and that? I go, yep. It's like, oh my goodness, it took a long time for that seed to sprout, didn't it? But it's true. It happens regularly, actually. And I remember, you know, when you said this one thing, and I go, that's really cool. They remembered that one thing, you know, and it pulled them right back. So, yeah, I think it's really fun. It just has sprouts inside of people, you know.
So I know this is going to be a tough question, but is there any one thing that you consider to be the most important aspect of your work?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually helping people make the connection to their intuitive self, to their, I call it their light, but helping them make that connection to God, if you will. But the universe is a better way to call it because people have so many opinions about God. Just helping them trust that connection. I just think that's what underlies everything that I do.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. It is wonderful because it's so empowering and it's so, you know, for me, it's so exciting and it's so just rewarding. You know? So, yeah. And I often think, you know, if I left the world today, you know, I would have left a trail. And I like that so much. You know?
Yeah.
And it's not about numbers. It's really about quality, you know? So, yeah, that feels good.
And it should. So with the New Age or New Thought movements, have you seen this way of thought change dramatically over the years?
Absolutely. Years ago when I started doing this metaphysical work, just the idea of meditation, people like, what? You know, or or metaphysics, like that was almost like voodoo or something, and now it's moved to where everybody knows the word. They have some, ability, some fluency with it. And they're also way more open to exploring the things that I teach. So I just think it's been a miracle in some ways, but I know I'm an Aquarian, and we tend to be ahead of the group, so I can see where I came in to be a way shower in a way, to kind of develop my skills so that I could help other people develop theirs. And so, yeah, it was a lot harder in the beginning.
I had that experience teaching yoga even a decade ago, where it was too much like religion for people. Or I've had, in teaching meditation, where I've had people come up to me saying, well, they feel uncomfortable meditating because they're worried that if they leave their mind, the devil is going to get in. Or even teaching kids yoga because they think we're trying to teach them a religion. So I've noticed the change in the last couple of years where people are realizing the benefits of meditation, mindfulness, and I think it's a good thing. Thank you for listening to Discernment Radio. If you like the show, please click to follow.